picking the most fantastic game in the world. Now let's get to this lecture today. You might ask, well, Mark, what is the 4th of July even about? It's almost like nobody knows, right? It has been reduced to barbecue and a brew and maybe some fireworks, right? Which doesn't make it unique because, as I said, I was in Mumbai, India for Diwali. They're popping off fireworks and people love barbecuing. We barbecue on Memorial Weekend. I don't even really know what the holiday's about either, but we love to barbecue and have a brew. We'll find any occasion to drink. But what is the 4th of July really about? And most importantly, what lessons does it hold for today? And I tell you, it holds many lessons for today. I really wouldn't even talk about this because American history is not so fascinating to me, but this is critical because you'll notice some changes in the American man and in their mentality. Also today, the white male, as they call him, the cisgender white male, is under great attack. In fact, he's been undone. Yes, he is fallen quite far from his former glory. But the question is there anything we could learn from him? Did he know something? Maybe he did. I mean, after all, he did come here, slaughter a significant portion of the native population, and establish one of the most dynamic economies ever to exist and one of the strongest militaries to span the entire earth and establish hegemony. So perhaps he knew something. Let's figure out what's relevant. Independence Day, they call it. The 4th of July, as I said, the birthday of America, reduced to a holiday with a brew and a barbecue and fireworks. How did this country start? This country started as 13 colonies of Britain. Yes, those colonies were established between 1607 and 1732. And the American Revolution began in 1765. So what is the story on that? How did all of that happen? Well, the chief reason that the Americans, the colonists, became revolutionaries is because of what they call, and I'm sure you heard this in the 4th grade, taxation without representation. But we must break this down. Taxation without representation. What is taxation? The government taking money from you. That is taxation. Money. Representation means you take my money, but I am at least represented by myself or by someone who has my interest, which is to say the money you took, we can utilize for my benefit as a citizen or subject. Now, if you have taxation, you're taking my money, but there's no representation, benefit, simply put. So you're taking my money, but there's no benefit. Well, that'll make you mad, especially if you're a mentally healthy, red-blooded, masculine man. So it made the American colonists angry. And this was the seed of the American Revolution. But this should sound familiar. Taxation without representation. You're taking our money, but you're giving us no benefit. For example, what benefit do you get when the government takes your money and then spends half of the dollar they take from you on war? Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and the list goes on indefinitely. What do you benefit as an American citizen from helping the Ukrainians? Not a damn thing. We're going to get into it. So we're actually being taxed more than they were being taxed when they were complaining. Listen, we're being double taxed. Income tax. You earn $1, we take some of the money. The government takes some of the money on the dollar you earned. Then what's left of the dollar, you go to the store and you buy a bag of potato chips. Then they give you sales tax. They've taxed you 2 times on $1. It's ludicrous. But you put up with it, and we're going to understand why and what happened to you. Where is the fervor and the independence streak that the framers of your country should have inspired you with? Why is it that we celebrate the 4th of July, the Independence Day, but we don't know what it means? We don't know what inspired it. We don't know the history of the country we live in. Now, there are generally a number of things that motivate human beings. And so we have to understand this as we look into this revolution. Human nature, simply put, we're generally driven to action by 3 things. Fear. Oh, we're scared. We're terrified. We're going to do it because we're scared. That's why a lot of you guys pay taxes now, isn't it? Affection. Oh, you want to get laid. You want to be liked. You want to feel good, fuzzy, cuddly. Or money. You want $1. You want to be able to survive. You want to be wealthy, maybe. Those are the 3 things that drive us and allow us to be manipulated. Some of us are noble, very rare. Those of us who are less noble are controlled by those 3 things that we mentioned. When we say there was a revolution because of taxation without representation, this is money focused. The American colonists said, you're taking our money, Britain, King George, but we get very little benefit for the money. So we want to keep our money. Yes, your revolution was about money. It was not about democracy. That's a lie. It was not about ending slavery, it had nothing to do with any of these things. It was simply about money. And the more you study, you will find that consistently much of the world you live in is shaped and controlled around money and affection, mostly sex. Now, one of the events and what drove the American Revolution, which you guys are all familiar with, is called the Boston Massacre, May 5, 1770. And by the way, shout out to the propagandists who have always existed, stretching the truth, twisting the truth until it's dizzy and falls out. The Boston Massacre. Oh, doesn't a massacre sound like a terrible thing? Lots of people killed. Oh, that sounds familiar. Isn't that what they do today? They use yellow journalism. When there's a shooting of 2 people, they call it a mass shooting. 3 people shot. It's a mass shooting. Is that really mass? I don't think that's mass. That's 3 people. In a country of 335 million, that's not mass. That's a lie. That's deceit. That's yellow journalism. That's propaganda. That's an attempt to take away your weapons. And we're going to talk about how the Americans started a revolution, and that was one of the defining sparks. The attempt of the British to confiscate military supply from the colonists. What is military supply? Weapons, guns, munitions, cannon, all these things. Why do they want to take away weaponry? To remove your ability to be free, strong, independent, democratic, rule yourself. So they take away your ability to protect yourself, to defend yourself, or to engage in offensive action. They take away your weapons. We are going to get into that. Boston Massacre, as the propagandists call it. What happened? British soldiers shot and killed several colonists. Yeah, I said several, which means not a great number of. Propaganda. Now, one thing I want you to notice is when we say the British soldiers did this, this was essentially the policing force of the government. For at this time, there was no formal policing force in the United States of America. In fact, it took quite a while for it to be developed. You know, they had militia and they had slave patrols. And there are some scholars who posit that the slave patrols were the earliest form of police or policing forces in the United States. And that's what evolved into our modern policing force. At this time, the government was in Britain, right? King George, the British Empire, Great Britain. And when they had soldiers in the Americas or among the colonists, that was essentially a policing force. They were there to establish order, to ensure taxes were collected and that people respect the crown and the government. That's a policing force. So when you have the British, the Boston Massacre, and some of these citizens, or in this case, subjects, are killed by the soldiers, that's essentially a police-involved shooting. That's police brutality. That's police violence. And it started a revolution. Do you guys engage in revolution when the police kill us? No, you might march and cause inconvenience, but you don't become revolutionary. Maybe you should. Yeah, that was police brutality. That was police violence. That was the government killing their own citizens, their own subjects. This is the very thing the American government accuses other regimes of doing. This is what they accuse Gaddafi of. This is what they accuse Saddam of. This is what they accuse Bashar al-Assad of. This is what they're accusing Putin of. Killing their own citizens. Well, this is what America does. What do you call Freddie Gray? What do you call the multitude of persons who have been killed in police involved shootings? What do you call that? I'm not saying any of these guys are good people. I'm just saying that a lot of this stuff is heavily interpreted. I'm just saying there is much for you to learn. I hope you are paying attention. And the truth is something that has been hard to identify through the ages, and even more so now in the information age, where any fool can become a propagandist or news reporter with merely a cell phone and an internet connection. Following the Boston Massacre, you had the Boston Tea Party. Clever name. That one I liked. I thought that was quite clever. Great marketing. Ironic and humorous. That was a good one. This was May 10, 1773. This is when American revolutionaries boarded a ship owned by, get this, not the British government, get this, not King George's this or that, but a private corporation. It sounds like it was called East India Trade Company. Company meaning business, meaning money, 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 money. What you would find if you would pay attention and make a study is that much of government and what they do is all about money. Not necessarily to make the government money, but to make money for the plutocrats who run government. This is why most of those in Congress are millionaires and multimillionaires, yet when they started in Congress, they were not multimillionaires. They started in Congress with modest incomes, and then they pulled a Nancy Pelosi and they became very wealthy. Insider trading and various other activities. They utilized government to enrich themselves. So often you'll find that government is just a band of criminals working to enrich themselves and keep you peaceful and docile. That's what that is. Yeah, so there was a ship in the harbor from the East India Trade Company. This ship was boarded by American revolutionaries, which is to say freedom-loving men, men who sought their own liberty, men who did not want to be controlled by oppressors or tyrants or those who would extract from them and give nothing back. They started dumping the tea into the harbor in rebellion. Now, me personally, I don't like to waste resources. You heard me? I would have kept the tea. I would have robbed the tea from the from the East India Trade Company, and I would have kept it myself. Maybe resold it, maybe drank some. You heard me? Pour up. But I wouldn't have dumped it in the harbor. That's just so disrespectful. But hey, do what you do. That was their method. They dumped it in the harbor. Why? It was a rebellion against taxation, which is essentially to say the government taking your money and not giving you enough back. That's what we're dealing with today. The government taking your money and not giving you enough back. Imagine how comical it is when the government, America, they take your money, but you still have to pay for healthcare. And I'm not a socialist, very far from it. I'm a real capitalist. You have to pay for healthcare. You have to pay for your own housing. You have to pay for university. If you live in a ghetto, you probably want to send your kids to private schools, or you want to homeschool. You got to pay for those things. But you're paying all this tax money. And you drive down the roads in some of the wealthiest parts of America. For example, I lived in Pacific Heights in San Francisco, very wealthy area. Potholes. I remember when I lived in Hollywood, Los Angeles, Hollywood, world-renowned city. Potholes. Where the hell is the money going to? Then I take a holiday to Costa Rica, developing country. Smooth, beautiful roads, paved, wide. Yes, for the economy of the future. In China, they're building freeways and roads. They're wider. Why? To accommodate 16-wheelers and trucks and commerce. We're not doing that yet. They're using new technology on the freeways to make them quieter as cars race down, because they're going to put housing alongside the freeways, and they want the people living there to be able to sleep in peace. They're thinking about everything they do, and they're being strategic. We're not. We have decaying infrastructure. For example, let me let you know how government moves with all the money that they have. Government is filthy rich, too much money, and somehow underwhelming in their performance. I bought the first home in a new community. I bought the very first home in a gated community. When I bought my home, nearby, there was a sign from government. The sign said, "There will be a new park here." And it named the politician and his title. So there will be a new park here. I bought the first home. About a year later, I have one home. Now there's an entire community around me. Over 200 homes have been built. The park, which requires no plumbing, doesn't require any significant building. They haven't even broke ground. That's how despicable the government is. And they have more money than the builders who built these private homes. That's because private sector is more efficient than government. Government does not need your money. They take your money. It's lost to corruption. See Hunter Biden as an example. It's lost to foreign entanglements that are all designed around enriching our plutocrats. Yes. Now, pay attention. Boston Massacre. Then we go to the Boston Tea Party. Huh? All the protests against taxation. That's how our country was founded. Protesting taxation. Ironically, with one of the sparks that lit the path to our nationhood being protest against taxation, today we hear our political class, plutocrats, who are saying that you got to pay your taxes. It's patriotic. Yeah, it's patriotic to, support the nation. It's not patriotic to line your pockets. This country was started as an anti-taxation country. But they want you to pay high taxes. They want you to pay unequal taxes. They want you to pay double taxes. Why? Because they fooled you into thinking that's moral, when really it is not. Really, it just enriches them to pursue endless warfare. It enriches them. Oh, and it also gets our young men killed. Shout out to the many soldiers who follow me. Much of the military follows me. Shout out to those real men. Also, shout out to the police who follow me, the good men who try to establish order in the land. 1774, the colonists established the Continental Congress. This was very important, for it was them saying, we are our own government. This is important for me to remind you of, because these colonists, these were human beings. These were men like you and I. And these were men saying, we will not be ruled by other men, especially other men who care nothing about us, who treat us as a site for extraction. And so they were then letting Britain and King George know that we do not acknowledge your authority over us. In fact, we establish our own government. I want you to pay attention, because it lets you know that you too can establish your own government. Once they established their own government, then in 1775, the British rush in. They rush in to do what? To confiscate military supplies. Well, why do they want to confiscate military supplies? Because any man who would have his own freedom must protect it. So they must take your guns. They must take your military supply. And once they take that, they must also break your will and brainwash you. So step one, take the guns. This has already happened in Canada. This has happened in the UK and in Europe. The Americans were different. That's why they left. Yes, America was started by those who left Europe. And when I think about the morality of the Europeans and those in UK, and find that there's a major lack of morality, and America was started by religious zealots. The guy on the Quaker box. They came seeking religious freedom. Well, today we've surely come a long way from those who would seek to live by any morality, but that's how our country was started. So 1775, the British rush in, attempting to confiscate military supplies from the colonists. And remember, this is a typical move of government to disarm you, to make you fearful of engaging in self-defense, or they'll call it violence. And this is why today there's every effort by the left, and left believes in big government. They believe in control. And that's why they have to take so many taxes, so they can grow this government and control you in every way. They can take control from the parents using the school system. They can, empower children to make decisions about their gender, and they can disempower parents from having any influence over the kids that they birth, over the kids that they pay for, over the kids that they're attached to for their whole life, not just 18 years, but the whole life of the child. So that the parent just becomes a source of extraction again. You got to provide room and board, but you can't impart your values to your own child. You can't have the final say-so in your own child's life. Spare me. And today they're doing the same thing that the British tried to do to our forefathers. They confiscate the guns. They create all these laws limiting our ability to protect ourselves and our ability to be revolutionary. You take the guns, you prevent revolution, you prevent freedom, you prevent independence. Yes, and there's not only that war, there's also the war for the mind. I want you to ask yourselves this. Do you ever wonder why the Google Corporation, also YouTube, which is owned by Google, you ever wonder why you can watch YouTube and you can see the most vile, sexually explicit content? Very disgusting. You see women in a state of undress doing yoga when really they're just putting on a sexual display. You can see various forms of nudity on YouTube, even if you're a child. But for some reason, you can't see someone getting punched out on YouTube, lest you would be flagged. Just a mere punch, you'd be flagged. They try to remove violence from YouTube. And you ask yourself, well, why is it that violence is so much more vulgar than a woman engaging in a horrific behavior? Why? Well, you see, they want you to be a sexual pervert, for the leaders of our society are wicked sexual perverts. And you spending all your time at home masturbating all day, that's good for them. You are not a revolutionary force. You are an idler. You are a person who is losing all of your energy and wasting your time and easy to control. Conversely, if you're someone who's familiar with violence, not scared of violence, willing to engage in self-defense, they want you to fear violence. They don't want you to ever see the realities that human beings, men, engage in. Sometimes somebody got to get socked out. They have to hide that away, make it seem so taboo and so bad to make you docile and weak into a little slave, make you obsequious and servile. That's why they cannot allow any violence to be shown, but they'll allow an infinite amount of sexual impropriety, which is more damaging to a child. To see a woman engaging in sexually explicit behavior, or to see somebody get socked out. I'd much rather have my boys and girls see somebody get socked out than see someone engage in sexually explicit behavior. Because I tell you what, for a young person, say you have a child, they're 10 years old, there is never a time in which I need them to mimic the behavior of someone being sexually explicit. At 10 years old, you never need to mimic that. At 10 years old, there may be a time where you need to engage in self-defense. You need to put your foot down and put your fist into someone's face. There may be a time for that. Huh? Weapons seizures ignited the battle of the first battle in the American Revolution, Battle of Lexington and Concord. This is what essentially told the British Crown, hey, we don't acknowledge you having any power over us. You are not our government. We are free men ruling ourselves. And they didn't like that. Here's a note. I think you guys know this, but people who have power, they don't want to give it up. They're not going to give it up easily, which means if you don't have power and you want something, you're going to have to take it. And that's not going, they're not going to just hand it over. So there's going to be some violence. If someone has power over you and you want to take your power back from them, there's going to be some violence. So the violence starts with the Battle of Concord and Lexington. July 4th, 1776, that's what this holiday is about. It's called Independence Day. This is when the Declaration of Independence was officially adopted by Congress. That Continental Congress we mentioned. What is Continental Congress? It is an organized body. It is a grouping of men. That's what we have, the Assassin. It is a grouping of men. It is organization. Every organization must have a force of power, the ability to exact self-defense as appropriate, to protect itself, things like this. We have sections throughout the world of the Assassin. Within one section, my executive told me, he said, one of the saints said, hey, I'm not here to learn how to become a security guard. I was like, oh, indeed. None of us are. But every soldier who would be a general should know how to be a good soldier. Every general should be humble enough to be willing to go back to the rank of soldier as appropriate for the greater cause. Let us all have enough humility and be light on the hubris. And more importantly, let us understand that we are within something greater than ourselves, and we must all make contribution. And most importantly, our security training trains you in what's called fighting spirit. Fighting spirit is something we must all have. Our men, our children, and our women, they must have fighting spirit. And our security training trains you on that. So I hope all of you who are within the different sections of the Assassin, everything we do is for good reason. And every man should have a militant bearing. You should be militant at all times and serious. Not to say don't enjoy yourself, but people should perceive you with a level of seriousness. They will respect you for that. As I said, July 4th, 1776, Independence Day. Yes, this is when the document was officially adopted by Congress. And the comical piece is the parchment, which is like the official one, which you can see in the National Archive in DC. That one wasn't even signed by the 56 signatories until August. I believe it was August 2nd. It's funny how history creates neat narratives, which is fine. Now, one thing I also want you guys to make note of, as men especially, there were 56 signatories. The average age was about 45, which is to say that men are doing meaningful things at 45. And the oldest man was 70, Benjamin Franklin. He's a great man of which you should make a study. In as much as that's the case, it lets you know that you can be productive into your older age if you choose. Life is choices, and we often don't have a proper sense of what is young and what is old. You are young. Whoever, if you're watching me, you are young and you have much to do and much to accomplish. Do be aware, though, that the youngest signatory was age 26. I believe it was a gentleman from South Carolina. He was age 26, which lets you know, like, man, my boy signing the Declaration of Independence at 26. Like, either he was a part of a powerful family or he was a hell of a hustler, which means you need to get on the good foot and make something happen. You dig? I point that out to you because often people will say to me, Marquette, what if I don't have peers whom I respect? I need access to mentors. Read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Someone remind me to add that to my Amazon list. I have a great list of books that are transformative, and that is one that I need to add. So remind me to do that. And you can read a number of other books I have listed there, which will be transformative to you. But the reason I wanted to know the age of the persons who signed that epic document is because those are the men I compare myself to. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, age 33. He was a person who wrote most of the Declaration of Independence, did it in Philadelphia. That is important for me to be aware of. That is who I'm competing with subconsciously. I'm not competing with the imbeciles that live in this city or the weak, effeminate males of this society. I'm competing with legends in history. And you should be too. For the sass and the saints, you are of the leadership class. You're the greatest of men. Whatever your pursuit is, you should seek to be the best. Now, the Declaration of Independence. It declared two really important things. Number one, which is why are we separating from King George, the crown, and Britain? Why are we separating, declaring our independence, our freedom, taking our liberty? And secondly, it declares the values of this new nation. What do we stand for? What are we about? Now, one value that's clearly been lost is the idea of, anti-taxation, minimal taxes, minimal government. That's how things started with us. That has been quite lost. One thing I think is important for context for those of you who don't think a revolution can occur, for those of you who have such limited experience and knowledge and you won't listen to reason, that you think that the way things are is the way they will always be, which is foolish. When the American Revolution occurred, this was colonists, nobodies, going up against the British Empire. It was said that the sun never sets on the British Empire. It was vast. Their army, their military, their marine force, their navy was immense and powerful. Can't be defeated, but it was. It can't be defeated, but it was. Yeah, use your brains. History is a great teacher if only you would listen and stop being scared. Your biggest issue is you're scared. You were conditioned to be fearful. That's why you follow the rules, even though the rules don't benefit you. You follow the rules, even though the rules are designed to keep you where you are and keep those up here where they are. Don't be a fool. Now, during the time of the American Revolution, America had how many people? It had 2.5 million people approximately. I generally don't trust government data, and historians are quite comical as well. A lot of people have these estimations, which there's no real possible way of actually getting an accurate number. How did you estimate how many persons were in the 13 colonies? That would be quite a task, right? They didn't have, technology. They didn't have instantaneous communications. I mean, hell, we got all of that, and we can't estimate how many persons are in America today. I surmise that we have at least 20 million undocumented folks, at least. Anyways, on paper back then, there was 2.5 million persons in what we call America, the the Europeans, right? The colonists, 2.5 million. Now, let's give you some context just so you comprehend what this means. That's the population of Houston, Texas. Yeah, 2.5 million. That's just the city of Houston, not the state of Texas. It's just the city of Houston. It's a very small population, 2.5 million persons. Today, we have about 335 million persons in America. It's amazing to think what they grew to. And that is why I appeal to you. When you support me, you support more than YouTube. You support more than exclusive content. You support a revolution, a new way of living. Yes, things start small, they grow big. It's necessary. You have to start somewhere. 2.5 million is what the American Revolutionary started with. Today, we're the most powerful country in the world. We have 335 million persons. We have a countless number of military bases around the world. We've come a long way. Certainly, the empire is in decline at this moment, but understand what grows out of men standing up for their freedom. Understand what comes out of that. Saints, I'll give you some time to send in your comments, questions as we wind down. Yeah, address some of the folks who supported. Acknowledge Gensley comes in with tuition. Also, I want to see someone who has never supported before come in. That's what I want to see. I mean, otherwise, there's no need for me to go live publicly. I just go live for the members. You dig? Because, yeah, I want to see someone who's never supported before. Yeah. And part of it is I want to know, is there value to you? In as much as there's no one else on YouTube I can watch. You know, there's some people who give good information. Like, for example, Patrick Bet David, he gives good information. But there is no one that can orate like I can orate. There is no one. There are none. And then in terms of knowledge, you might find someone like Noam Chomsky. He has exceptional knowledge, but he's a sleeper to listen to. I give you the Noam Chomsky level of knowledge. I give you the Malcolm X level of oratory. And I give you the revolution and practical steps. This exists nowhere. Let me know it's really real. Shout out to Gensley supporting the work, and he always does. Now, I also acknowledge Jose. Shout out to the Saints in Florida. Sends in tuition. Shout out to TA. Sends in tuition as well. I acknowledge Donovan. Shout out to moderator extraordinaire. Writes peace to the Saints. Shout out to Joshua. Comes in with tuition. Joshua's always supporting the work. You did. Shout out to Frozen One. He writes a question in the chat. Okay, let me see what you got. He writes, possible to release a leather man and woman jacket or all black man and woman shoes. So when you say shoes, are you talking about athletic shoes or are you talking about fashion shoes? But the answer is yes. And so if you let me know if you're talking about athletic shoes or fashion shoes, we can get on that. And then in terms of a leather man and woman jacket, we probably wouldn't do leather for man and woman brand. That's not really the aesthetic of that brand. But we would consider doing it for MDB Label or Assassin because that's certainly the aesthetic of those brands. You know, they're dark, they're hard, you know, very masculine. Those are serious brands. Man and Woman brand is more lighthearted. It's family. It's man and woman. You dig? Assassin and MDB Label is more man. Thank you for that question. Appreciate that. I saw someone ask what the Cash App is. So let me just pop up the banner so that they can send in without being fleeced by the Google Corporation. Shout out to Marcos. He writes, peace to the Saints. I'll catch the replay after my workout / breakfast. Yes, sir. Shout out to Zachary. He writes, peace to the Saints. We appreciate the game. Shout out to Mr. Upshaw. Comes in with support. Shout out to Major Mind and Soul. He writes, this ism is all the fireworks I need today. Quick question. How do you suggest I go about increasing my geopolitical knowledge? I'm less knowledgeable than I'd like to be in this. Peace of the Saints. I saw this question in Discord. I actually responded in Discord. I don't know if you saw it, but in short, number one, generally speaking, we don't need to increase in this. Certainly for the intellectual, this is like a form of play and enjoyment, but mostly it's a distraction when we really have to get on with the immediate affairs of our lives, which is earning well, your wealth, maintaining good relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, or otherwise. And often geopolitics can be a distraction until we're able to impact them, until we're organizing to impact them. However, there are some great works and that can establish your foundation of how to look at the world geopolitically speaking. And I have a couple of these books in my Amazon list, and you'll be able to tell which ones are related to geopolitics. And I'll just highlight that I have a book there, about two books by Noam Chomsky, which I think will be great for establishing a basis for knowledge. I have another book on media, which will be helpful as well. So there's maybe 5 or 6 books, as I think about it, that'll help you with the foundational knowledge of that. I might have that linked in the description, but if not, it is if you go to amazon.com/shop/the saint and the sinner, you'll see some of those foundational works. Shout out to Rooks. He writes, "Peace of the Saints. Thank you for your time. Thanks for the refresher." Absolutely. And I think a lot of folks need it because, you go to an average 4th of July barbecue, they don't have the foggiest idea on what the 4th of July is actually about, which is quite comical that they're supporting something without knowing what precisely they're supporting. People will take any opportunity to drink alcohol. Shout out to Saint CB, writes, "Peace of the Saints." Shout out to the Lady Saints. She writes, "For the quality lecture." You dig? That's what I'm talking about. Shout out to Mr. Upshaw, came right back. He says, "Quick question, Saint. To what level do you think your message is being suppressed, and what are you doing to counter it?" Peace of the Saints. I think it's being suppressed to the highest level. For when you look at any of my competitors, they are inferior in pretty every measure that would allow you to advance in a platform that is largely based on speaking and aesthetic. Their aesthetic is not impressive. And then their speaking is even less so. So the suppression is significant. And one thing on this channel, I've never tried to run adverts ever, but it occurred to me months ago that I couldn't. I never tried, but I couldn't because the channel was demonetized, right? Long time ago. And so with demonetization, they're demonetizing you because they flagged your content. When they flag your content, they're of course not pushing it out because they view it as bad or dangerous. And it's really just dangerous to their matrix narrative. And one thing you guys should also be aware of is many persons who purport to be against the matrix, they actually are the matrix. And many of them you'll find will come out as homosexuals. They're currently closeted. You have Adam 22, you have Sneeko, you have Molestiny, you have DJ Fatademics. These folks will come out as bisexual. They're already engaging in behaviors that we know are sexually deviant. And so they're easing out of the closet. Most of them have been exposed for being cucks. For example, just recently, Adolf 22 has had his wife publicly railed by another male on camera for money that he doesn't need. We already know Molestiny engages in the same behavior, and Sneak Ho engages in the same behavior. So these folks who are all agents of the matrix, and it's quite funny because they're controlled opposition. You follow them thinking that you're following something different. It's almost like people who watch Fox News and you think Fox News is so different than CNN, but it's actually just two heads on the same dragon. Shout out to all the saints supporting the work. Shout out to Ken and young Latino homeboy Broly writes, "Tuition, I always gain knowledge." I appreciate that. Shout out to Ill Rude. He writes, "I don't think people understand how factual your statement really is. They don't. When I speak, I think people catch about 20% of it." He writes, "I've listened to a lot of YouTubers after listening to you, and I found it increasingly challenging to hear them talk." Precisely. That's how we know the message is being suppressed. I went to elite universities, and I would listen to lectures from Nobel laureates. I'd listen to lectures from people who have been in presidential administrations as advisors, and they're mostly sleepers. You just can't make it through this stuff. And that's why every time I speak to you all, I always come well-researched with notes, and I engage it in the most entertaining way possible. Shout out to Edward. He writes, "Thanks for dropping truth and knowledge. I appreciate you." Thank you. Shout out to Justice. He writes, "Tuition, stay gliding, Saint." Sir, yes, sir. I also acknowledge the Frozen one. He writes, "One more question in the chat." All right, let's see what you got. And shout out to my members, by the way. Shout out to the members at patreon.com and marquettism.com. We actually have new member orientation coming up. So if you haven't joined, I invite you to join. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a lot of my stories. We got saints from around the world doing their meetups for exercising, really thriving in health and wealth. And so, we have a real movement going here. The Frozen one writes, "Also forgot to ask about a possible release of a minimalist type silver band watch with black or pink face for man and woman. Every man needs a good timepiece." Indeed. And I am going to do a live session for the members coming up, and it'll be basically for investment opportunities. There'll be a number of curated products that I know people will buy that you can create under my brand, any of my brands. And I already have, in most cases, I'll have the manufacturer lined up. You'll know your exact inputs and costs, and you will help you decide on your retail on what you're going to sell it for. You'll know what your profit will be, and we'll set up those opportunities for Saints because we know a number of people come like, "Hey, Marquette, I got this money. What do I do with it?" And I always encourage product-based business because when you learn that process, you can utilize that with any different type of product once you've mastered that process and make yourself wealthy for a lifetime. So we're going to bring some of those opportunities to the Saints. More of those opportunities. I mean, we have a number of Saints who are already making good money. You dig? I sent out thousands of dollars every month, and I got to start probably like at least publishing the first names of the people I'm sending money to so people know it's real. You dig? Shout out to the ones actually getting paid out here. You heard me. Mintuition, right? Still waiting for Marquette to say or you feel me? And my counter is still at 0. I speak well, but I'm currently working on my speech and diction when speaking on my channel. Harder than you think, especially when you're speaking extemporaneously about facts, right? Shout out to Felix. He writes, "Peace to the saints. Peace to the saints." A lot of these YouTubers, they speak very slowly because their mind moves slowly, right? It's just a representation of what's inside. And then you have other ones who babble fast, but they're not saying anything with any level of beauty or engagement. Makes you wonder how they have a fan base. And I know precisely why they have a fan base because these are Skittle guzzlers, and the Google Corporation, which is a pride corporation, pushes these folks out because these are the people who are completely in line with their agenda, which is funded by George Soros and many others, typically those in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, the gay capital of America. Huh? Yes, there's much going on in the society that you should pay attention to. Saints, this does conclude my lecture. I'll give you all just a moment for those who might have something they need to say. Otherwise, I do again want to echo the sentiment that was shared earlier in terms of being safe today. For many people will be over consuming intoxicants. They will be using unregulated fireworks, and these pose dangers to themselves and to you. And so, be cautious today as you go about your affairs. It has been a pleasure to have this time to fellowship with you. Let us end this with our tradition, the creed of the assassin. Repeat after me with full conviction, knowing this is true of you. The creed of the assassin. I am going to be who I truly am because I am remarkable, and I'm going to strive every moment to show the greatest part of who I am. Until next time, peace to the saints.